Okay.
Okay, you can put it on. Yep, 2 seconds over. All right, call this meeting to order. This is a special town board meeting in town of East Troy. It's a September 18th, 2023. It's 5 PM. Roll call, Clarkowski here.
Wales here.
Reyes here. Church here.
Booker here. All right, and Kim, are our postings in order for this meeting?
Yes, they are.
All right. Our first item on the agenda is discussion and action on bill of sale, assignment of interest, consent of transfer, crossing license and indemnity agreement between the town of East Troy and the East Troy Railroad Museum. The actual agreement, I forwarded it all to you the morning after the last board meeting we had. It's only 2 pages, but like usual, the devil's in the details. There's some questions still here to make sure we're all covered. And the board may also have some additional questions on it, because once we sign this, then they have to sign it. And then the Bureau of Harbors and Rails from the DOT signs it. I tried to talk to a person there and it was unsuccessful to make sure that even though the original transfer, the state had to sign. In this case, it also talked about, funding and replacement. In this case, we're talking about buying it, and the rehab or replacement comes later. But I don't see there's any harm here, because if the state gets it and reads it, says, well, yes, we're going to sign it, or no, we don't have to. So anyway, that's where we're at. The attachment A, that's referenced in the second, number 2 on the first page, was the one we all were looking at from the last a couple of years ago on how we got to this point. That's the stipulation where it went from the municipality of East Troy to the Railroad Museum.
Which municipality? Would that be the village?
That'd be the village of East Troy
Thank
and the
you.
Railroad Museum. So we look at that and pass that on. So one of the first things that Jim brought up here was looking at number 4, number 9, and number 11. When we finally got to the point of saying this is good enough, just see if we're going to prove it or not, 2 things came up. One of them, they wanted a interest rate that was, didn't really identify it. So we said identify
He
it.
said 2 points lower than the federal rate,
Yeah. And
which you can't have.
which we can't do that, because we in effect, that would be considered a
We're
gift.
a municipality.
Yes, the difference would be.
Right. So we firmed that up, as well as the term, is 10 years. And then again, when you look at number 4, it says not to exceed an aggregate amount of $50,000 for maintenance. And that would be anything that would occur on that bridge to be considered maintenance. And then you go to number 9, it says the town's purchase of the bridge structure is conditioned upon the museum paying 50% of all unfunded rehabilitation and replacement costs not to exceed an aggregate amount of $50,000. And when we were verifying that number, one of the board members said to their president and their CEO, all right, so that means the museum's maximum exposure for money is $100,000. And that's what number 11 says, the $100,000 in aggregate for any loans that they may need. Now, I'll let you know that when the railroad crossing had to be reinstalled on Highway 20, the railroad had to pay for that. They didn't have any money, so they actually borrowed money from the village on that. I don't know the terms precisely, but sounded like that's what they did. So the exposure for us here is twofold. One, the bridge fails or starts failing and it's got to get posted, which would be bad for anybody using that bridge, okay? Especially the commercial and heavy trucks and fire trucks and whatever. And the other portion would be if we dug our heels in and said, no, we'll pay for the bridge approaches and nothing else, we could put put them out of business, basically. They're a nonprofit. Their entire money stream is from their train rides and dinner trains and holiday trains. And remember what happened when we started this whole thing, COVID, they had a year with nothing. So that really hurt them. That's probably why they had to end up borrowing money to do the railroad crossing at Highway 20 in the village. So what I told them when we went through this, their first number was smaller. It was like 50,000 total. And I said, knowing from what the board has discussed so far, that's not going to sell. So you get back to your board and come up with a number, that's fair, equitable, and has a chance of this board approving. And I think that's kind of what they did. They basically doubled. I believe they went from 50 to 100. So what we have to do is make sure the language is airtight for the 50,000 and 50,000, number one. And number two, that all the other language that's in here, there's not any other concerns that the board has about any, additional liability or what if we do, what if we don't do anything and all that type of stuff. So, Bill, when you went through this agreement, do you have any questions? Mostly to Jim, to the board.
Like you, I was concerned about numbers 4, 9, and 11 as a unit. I would specifically ask in number 9, we highlight all unfunded rehabilitation and replacement costs, but then we associate that only with the bridge being replaced. So
Yes.
is it replaced and or rehabbed?
I suggest we strike out rehabilitation and.
Okay, that would work.
I think this paragraph should only deal with 50,000 for the replacement and leave number 4 as 50,000 for
Maintenance.
maintenance. So in aggregate, it's 100.
All right, so then shouldn't we add rehabilitation in 4?
No,
Because there's 2 ways this thing could be fixed. One is to do a rehab and one is to do a replace. If we don't have rehab in there, now I'm afraid that we're not getting that part in here. Because the maintenance could be considered rehabilitation / maintenance. I agree 100% that under 9, it should just say replacement costs. Strike rehabilitation and. I agree with that. So the discussion is under 4, should it say
maintenance and
ongoing
or
maintenance?
rehabilitation.
Yes, that's what I think.
That makes it stronger.
Yes.
In what line?
Third line in number 4, ongoing maintenance / rehabilitation thereof.
Yeah.
I think you said and or, right, Jim?
And or.
And or. That tightens that up. Okay.
I have one other question for number 12, just for our sake. Is there some sort of a clearinghouse for such research or applications for this kind of
There
funding?
is, it's through the DOT. As a matter of fact, one of the workshops that just been floating around here that came from the state talks about the next 2 programs coming up, which, depending upon how long it takes the railroad to do this, we could be looking at the next program here, which is okay. But the clearinghouse is the DOT, because even the federal money is funneled through the DOT. The state just agrees to follow all federal standards when they take the money, and then the local governments agree to follow all state and federal rules when they take the money. There would be a agreement, local agreement that would have to be signed between us and the DOT when it comes time to getting funding.
What
But
about
again,
the county?
We have to own it. County will not have, well, they've already told us they're not going to put any money in this. The county, once the list of bridges come in, we were told that this would be number 1 on their list. That means that the county engineer / the director of public works, he would be the one, when he has all the bridges to look in the county, saying these 3, not these next 4 or something like that. So would the county, have money in this? They already told us no at the meetings that we had. And it would be very, very unlikely that they would ever put anything into this bridge because it's not a county trunk highway.
But even though they can't put money in, they still are in position to tell the federal government which projects to fund?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yes. And that's a benefit that the counties get because they're closer to the projects and they can prioritize them. So that's a good thing, I think, because if it's totally, flip a coin type deal, that's not very equitable for anybody. So, okay, so that's the.
One other question.
Yep.
I have always felt that there was good faith in all negotiations. It's going on for about 6 months now. March, I believe this started.
At least,
I don't see how the railroad would work towards any claim of, that we didn't apply for the funding or a need to put a time limit on this because the bridge can go at any time.
Yeah, well, the actual funding application, grant application, is based on us owning the bridge. So we can't do that now. It would be all right to say something that we strive towards that goal, or to say something effective at the earliest opportunity. Going back to your number 11 or 12.
I think my guess is, I don't know if the railroad included that, but my guess is they're trying to make sure that we act with urgency because we've been
Yes.
talking about this. So I think that's why they just wanted in there to make sure that we do it.
Maybe under 12, we should say application will be made at the earliest possible timeframe. Would that be proper to say that under 12?
No, it says when it's gonna start.
No,
It's
well,
as soon as
the approval.
approval, as evidenced by signatures on this document.
in other words, we're waiting for them.
Right.
Said application shall commence upon approval. Well, I guess you're right. That
As
does
soon
say
as
it.
we get ownership, we need to start the process.
Yes, yes,
We've been working on the
Yeah.
process longer than
yes.
this.
I did share this last correspondence with Tim Lynch because I still think he's going to write this one. That being said, the state did not, we approved this contract with Core here at the last meeting to do the bridge rehab report. Questions needed to be answered from the DOT to the engineer, Core. And they said, we're not going to answer those questions until you own the bridge. So the municipality owns it. In other words, they're not working on it until this is done. So that's the catch-22 I was telling you about. If the changes we have here, they have their special meeting and approve it, then it gets forwarded to the Bureau of Rails and Harbors for their approval. I don't believe it's a signed agreement until they do, unless they strike it as NA. But I believe they're going to do it. I believe they're
Mr.
going
Chairman,
to.
just one last question. I'm certainly in favor of this project. There are hundreds of residents that need that bridge to get out on ES and go about their lives.
Yeah.
Could you remind me what the replacement estimate was and the repair estimate was?
The total replacement was considered with design, construction, and everything, the whole works, including oversight, was like $1 million. Okay. The rehab, there was several versions of it. Some were quick and easy, like 50,000, and one of them that included the piling work, I believe, was like 250,000. Okay, that could be where we end up. And again, if it gets in time, that could be 100%. But the bridge rehab report may indeed spell out the fact of the matter is that if you try to replace the deck on this bridge, the deck is going to go away. So in effect, it's no longer a rehab, it's a replacement. We don't have that answer because we won't get the bridge rehab report until we own this. Again, all this stuff is really dependent upon us taking ownership of the bridge.
But the worst case scenario, if it's $1 million,
Hmm.
we could be on the hook for 900,000,
Uh,
950,000,
uh,
which
Yeah.
is cost of running a town.
It could be 100,000 at the worst because, well, their part was 50 on a replacement. And yeah, it could be 150 for us. Right, because
If
it's
we get
20,
If we get
if
funding,
it's
get the
80%, if we get
so
90,
worst case, we don't get any funding.
well, that's not gonna be the case. There will be funding. The question is when and how much? 80% funded, 90% funded, 100% funded. There is no 0% funded unless we write in here saying there's no funding, we don't take ownership. Well, I don't think that's a possibility. The bridge
We
is
can't
there.
find
Does
out.
it say if we don't get funding, we don't take ownership?
Well,
It does
We're buying
not
it
say
for
that.
$1.
it doesn't say that.
I think you're just saying we could put that in there, but we don't want to bankrupt it.
Well, in effect, that would take away then the 50 and 50. Then it would be keep the 50 at the rehab and then the replacement, instead of saying 50,000, make that 100,000. But that would put them in peril. If it's the worst case scenario, 80% funding would be worst case scenario. Okay. If this was, again, they kept ownership and they get no funding, that's their baby. Okay. If it's a municipality through the bridge programs, it's going to be 80, 90, or 100% funded. Are we rolling dice a little bit? Well, yeah, it would be nice if we had this.
The
done a
problem
couple
is
months ago.
this, even if we argue that they have an obligation to keep our easement open, which they do as an easement holder, if they can't afford to do it, the town still has a responsibility, because it's a town road,
Correct.
to keep it maintained. So it's just a matter of how much longer are we going to kick this can down the road?
Right.
And if we have a possibility of 100% funding, I think now is the time to do it. My only other question with this agreement is, in number 11, as a general rule, I don't think towns should ever be a lender for anyone. It's taxpayer money that we are loaning to other people.
I'm not wrong.
Right. Now, with Shorewood Drive, we were arguably able to do that because there was a specific statute that talked about funding, town funding for improvements on private roads.
But that was a pass-through. This would be not that either. It's not a gift. It's not a pass-through. It is a loan to somebody outside of the town.
Yes.
It's a loan. Now, Kim, we loaned over the years, and I know we used the landfill fund a lot for loaning, but was that mostly for town projects, or was that, who do we all loan to over the
The
years?
only, in 19 years, the only one we've loaned to is the fire district,
That was for
their roof project.
the roof project. And that we use a
Charge them a
landfill fund?
1%.
It was low.
I don't think we touched the landfill. I think it was just,
I thought we took it out of there.
Well, and the landfill fund says monies that we take out of that fund go into our general fund. Are we supposed to be using our general fund for private loans? Probably not.
Good point. All right, well, is there?
Well, I'm assuming we're going to take a loan and basically charge them whatever we're paying.
right, it would be probably
The
what the
tax
Board of
rate.
Commissioner of Public Lands rate, current rate is at the time we'd have to take. the
So it
loan.
would be a pass-through as well. The only thing would be our administrative burden, right?
In the Bureau of Public Lands, that revolving loan fund, that's only for governments, correct?
Correct.
So the railroad couldn't use that.
No, it's for municipalities and school districts.
So it'd be our loan money for that project. I don't know.
And it would have to be the rate that we're charged.
Right,
Would have to be.
right. I think you say that, right?
I said it shall not be less than the applicable federal rate. Each month. Now, a 10-year, anything over 9 years is considered a long-term loan. So each month, the IRS comes out with an interest rate that needs to be charged for your various loans, small term, midterm, long term. And you can't have less than what that rate is for the month that the loan is issued.
Okay.
It's a like mandatory minimum interest rate you have to charge.
Can we change the wording to say the Board of Commissioner of Public Lands rate?
That fund is there and it's always gonna be there.
No, I think I want to keep it as this. If the interest rate is lower, then but getting the DOT to sign it a second time.
I don't know where the two meet, where the federal
Right.
rates and the
Right.
state rate would meet.
Well, we're gonna charge them if there's a loan to them, we're gonna charge them whatever rate we're paying. So in effect, that's a pass-through also then, isn't it? We're not
That's
absorbing
exactly
that
what it is.
cost. Now, we do have, again, our part of it on where we get the money, for that, that's gonna be handled just like, the old roads, right? New roads, old roads, whatever, it'll be a budgeted item. Not knowing what that number is a little,
I think we have to keep, no matter what our rate is, we still have to charge them whatever the federal rate is, even if it is higher. Otherwise, it's considered a gift.
Okay,
then that's the answer.
What if it's lower?
Keep
All
that.
right, what if it's lower?
What if you change the wording to the federal rate or?
It says shall not be less than.
the federal rate.
Okay,
That covers you both ways.
that
Yeah.
and the public service, whatever, whichever is great.
Okay, all right, and then back to the question I brought up 5 minutes ago. Do we want to keep under the replacement part, the 50,000? Because again, if it's $1 million replacement cost, and say, worst case, it's 80%, so that's 10%, that's 100,000, and they have 50 listed on this. Okay. Now, is there a chance of the 90 and 100? Yes. Okay. But if we're protecting ourselves, maybe that number 9 should be 100. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, then number 11 would have to change to 150.
Correct.
I guess that was my big question, was how was the 50 calculated and the 100 calculated? And it sounds like it was kind of a random number.
Well, we had the same discussion we're having here with the various funding levels and what the replacement and rehabilitation costs were. So again, it's still the question still remains on what the funding level is. The big rehab was 250,000. Okay, so 20% of that. Okay, well, the 100% obviously there's no issue. 90%, that's 25,000. Okay, split both ways, not a problem. Question is, when you get to the replacement, if it is $1 million and is 80%, that's $100,000. So that's the question on
Each.
how we protect ourselves versus them protecting themselves. That's the point. And how the number came about, we had the same discussion. Here's the rehab cost, here's the replacement cost, here's the various funding levels. And the first number they had was 50,000 total, so they broke it into the two parts, 50-50. That's 100, okay?
Well, I guess when I read it, it's in section 4, and it said expenses of ongoing maintenance. In my mind, that was whatever is needed until we get the final decision made on what we're gonna do.
Yes,
Right,
Not necessarily like the 20% of the 50,000, the rehabilitation.
but if we get a rehabilitation, that
They
means then we're gonna have a
still have to be
replacement
on the
10, 15 years from now.
It's still
Yeah,
not
right.
on the hook.
So then that's a bigger risk if it's 15 years from now before we do the replacement, and they
That
only owe.
50,000 and
isn't
100
gonna
don't
last.
apply because it doesn't count for inflation or
True.
the cost of actual doing the job.
and let's say
But
full
it doesn't
replacement
say a
is
time
15
limit.
years down the road. There's no guarantee this railroad will still be in operation 15 years from now.
Well,
So how do you enforce a contract against
There's
an
no
entity
time
that's not
limit
even
on this
solvent?
agreement.
Well, there will have to be a bridge there, whether there's a railroad there or not. You're not gonna put a head grade crossing
True.
at that location. So the bridge is gonna be there,
Ultimately, it's going to fall on the town no matter how we look at it,
and
because a town road goes over that bridge.
correct. So again, we are playing the part here on sharing risk, okay? And they put some limits on it. The question is, can we live with those limits? Okay? I'd feel a lot better if number 9 was 100,000, then we're covered, but that could be a deal breaker for them, because then it would be 150,000 aggregate. That's a lot of rent for a nonprofit.
Maybe not.
Maybe not, don't know.
If it comes back and says, no, you need replacement, they wouldn't be spending 50,000 on maintenance.
Correct.
So we could probably just change number 9 to say 100. And then argue when they come back and say, well, we're not gonna do both.
Yeah, you're gonna.
This could be one or the other.
Yes,
So if it's replacement, you've already agreed to pay 100,000, so what's the issue?
true. That is true.
That's on 80-20 funding stream. They pay 100.
That would be great, yes. That's one way to do it.
I guess playing devil's advocate, if we don't get this signed and we miss out on the opportunity this year.
Absolutely.
Application is October 20, deadline October 27.
Waller County's willing to step up and help with this whole process to get
Yes.
that through, from what I understand.
As well as the state programming engineer. They know the issue here, they've seen all this.
So it's limited risk this year if we have
Yes.
time.
He
right?
seemed-
True.
He seemed pretty confident if we can get this done this year, from what I'm understanding,
Right.
which is huge for the community.
Yeah, it's never gonna get better than this.
No.
It's not.
So are we saying then number 9 should read, we're still striking the rehabilitation, but changing the 50 to 100? Right?
I think so.
Rehabilitation and
No, that's number 4.
Number
9.
4 had maintenance
Forehead
and or
and/or
rehabilitation.
rehab.
Number 9, we're striking
Striking.
rehabilitation
Yes,
and then increasing the amount to 100.
yes.
Okay, so we're covered there. So going back to 4 then, are we covered there? Again,
So it's ongoing maintenance and rehabilitation?
And/or rehabilitation.
that's where we had it. Now the question is that appropriate now that we changed? 9.
Yes, it is, because what if CORE comes back and says, you're not at a sufficiency rating where you're going to get a replacement this year?
Chances are we will, but that's not guaranteed. Okay, all right, I think we got it then. The only question is, I think Barb, you brought it up a little bit.
I have a few.
Yeah, go ahead.
First of all, Jim, can you explain in paragraph number 1 why it says "and among the town of East Troy"? Line number 3,
Okay, where are you at, number one?
paragraph number, not the number 1, but the
Oh,
first paragraph,
okay.
bill of sale.
Oh, okay,
Why is it state made by and among the, why are we using the term among? I just don't understand. Could you explain that?
agreement is made by and
Because
among,
there's more than one
Right.
entity, right, that we're joining with.
Right.
Because it's
Okay.
a three-party.
I wasn't quite sure.
Three party,
that we were
right.
going to distribute this bill amongst the residents in the town of East Shore.
okay,
Just wanted to clarify that.
right.
All
that's
right,
good.
number 2, the actual number 2, the third paragraph.
Mhm.
It has 2 different numbers. It says notify them at least 24 hours in advance before commencing any work. Then you skip down 2 more lines and it says notify the museum's operation manager at least 48 hours in advance.
Because,
Hold on,
Yeah.
in neither of these cases does it say unless in the event of an emergency. We need to think that if this bridge goes for some other unknown reason, that we don't have to notify them 24 or 48 hours in advance. We're doing the work right away.
Well, the first instance is that you're notifying them 24 hours in advance if you're gonna be within 25 feet of the track. Okay, that's town doing some work. The second one talks about, workers are present on the railroad corridor. I guess that's almost the same. Town and it was contractors.
But I still think we need a clause. in
I'll just
there.
add a sentence at the end that says, all notifications
Thank
may
you.
be waived in the event of an
Thank
emergency.
you. That's all I'm asking.
Yep.
What was the other one? Okay, the other thing is we have only one number for a contact. I'd like a backup number. I want more than just museum operator manager. What if he's on vacation? What if he's in the hospital? I want 2 numbers.
Then you leave a message
Are we covered
at that
then?
number.
Are we covered then?
That's
As long
giving
as you're
notice.
within the
That's giving
timeline.
notice.
Yeah, it's in the,
Okay.
it's in the contract.
Wasn't sure,
What's
because
in the
there are
agreement?
some things that need to actually speak to a person. All right, number 3, on the second line, it says, town shall procure and shall thereafter maintain, enforce. Shouldn't it be and enforce? ANDENFORCE? Maintain and enforce during the maintenance work?
No,
No, okay,
no.
thank you. I stand corrected. Lastly, number 5. Where it talks about the town will indemnify and hold harmless the museum. I interpret this as they're getting off the hook before the bridge has been replaced. Why are they limiting their liability if something happens before the total bridge is replaced 100%? Why is there a limit to their liability?
You're covered with the last sentence. Okay, claim- Following the date of transfer of ownership, isn't this whole thing apply
Where does it state that?
the last sentence, I think?
Following the date of transfer of ownership.
Right, all claims would be against us once we own it, is what they're saying.
Okay,
That's the way I read it. Is that correct?
That's what it says. But if you look at the other paragraphs, I mean, it could be argued either way because in 6, it's saying that the bridge is transferred for the sum of $1.
Right.
But then the whole agreement, like in 9, our purchase is conditioned upon, oh, I see what you mean.
do you?
Until the bridge is replaced.
Yeah,
Until said bridge is replaced. I thought 5 says that, but the town.
The town's purchase
but after
is
you
conditioned.
transferred it for $1,
Occasion.
we can't be liable for the whole thing if the bridge hasn't been replaced. Do you see where I
But we
struggle?
have to be owners in order to apply
Oh,
for
I
anything.
get it.
Right.
Right.
But why is the railroad getting off?
I don't think they are.
Okay,
Again, read number 5, and that's critical. But if you read 5 again, it said the town will indemnify and hold harmless, skip all the middle junk, following the date of transfer of ownership. So, to me, that's saying after we own it, the museum is out of it.
that's.
Is that what she's
saying.
saying?
That
That's
is what
I'm
she's saying.
Barb is saying. Why is the railroad totally out of it when we buy the bridge for $1 and it still hasn't been replaced?
Because it's not theirs anymore.
Right.
Oh,
We have to own it.
okay. Is the bridge there versus the transfer of ownership? No, Barb's right. The transfer of ownership occurs before the bridge is replaced.
Right.
Yes, it has to get
Right,
our
right.
funding.
We know that.
But do we have to say that in 5? That's, no, Barb's right. She's saying that,
When we buy the bridge for $1,
Mhm.
the
We take all liability associated with the bridge.
But later on, we're saying that they have to participate in rehab and maintenance. Why isn't that said again
Replace.
in 5?
in other words, why?
Oh, I see.
Why is the road off the hook until it's a new bridge? That's the question. That's good. That's right.
That's my question.
You know,
We can say with the exception of expenses, the railroad agrees to pay in paragraphs.
There just has
4
to be
and 9.
something referring to the later parts of this contract.
They would like that.
arising directly or indirectly from the use or presence of the bridge structure, occasion or claimed against. I think we have to have something in there to cover that.
Yeah.
That's what I said.
So after,
A new sentence at the
no,
end.
after
But doesn't
the,
it say by reason, only the expenses that are incurred by reason of injuries or deaths of persons or damage to the property?
yes, it does
But
say
if
that.
that occurs before the total bridge is replaced, they're totally off the hook,
Yes, they are.
Yes.
which I
They don't
Because-
have money to,
Well, they wouldn't own it anyway, so how would they be liable?
it doesn't exempt them
Negligence.
from the 100,000 in section 9.
It does not.
No.
But I could add, with the exception of amounts the railroad must pay as outlined in paragraphs 4 and 9 herein, if you want me to add that language.
please.
Yes.
I mean, they're two kind of separate things.
I understand they're separate, but I also think the interpretation could be misconstrued without an additional verbiage.
Yes.
Have there been any injuries or deaths associated with that bridge?
No.
Nothing.
But what if a car drives into the railing, damages the railing?
We've already
Goes
had
off the
that.
edge.
It doesn't say, oh, death of persons or damage to property. Hmm.
Use or presence of bridge.
Yeah, I don't know if I need to add that, but I don't think it changes if I add that language in there.
Yeah, what you're saying is you can't have it both ways here. If we own the bridge, we can't make them liable until it's replaced. They still have to have it insured. They can say, once we own it, they're done. That's kind of what this is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's what you're saying.
they are just agreeing to the 100,000. That's it.
Exactly.
Because we are providing the insurance. That was the only question I had was, Kim, is this insurance in alignment with what we have in place, the $2 million per occurrence and $4 million aggregate.
It would cover it under our policy we
Our
currently
normal
have.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the point is well taken here, and I do believe that to be the case. We can't have our cake and eat it too, because if we own it and we're saying, what we want to say is, you know, we're not taking, the agreement is not fully enforced until after the bridge is replaced. So doesn't that make them
Not
liable?
really,
No.
because how can we apply for any funding?
Well, No,
That's the
we
whole
still
point.
gotta sign this. No, we still have to sign the agreement. What I'm saying is, even if we sign the agreement, and the verbiage in here is basically saying we're not taking full ownership of this until it's replaced, how does that then
No.
make it,
Oh,
so
I
that
see
the
what you
railroad
mean.
is not-
So you want to try to apply as a co-owner of the bridge?
Until it's replaced.
I don't know.
Yeah, what would that do to the grant? I mean,
You know,
It says
I
right in
mean-
section 1 that any and all right, title, and interest the museum has in the structure is transferred to the town
correct.
upon transfer of $1.
That's what it
So
says.
the only thing that they're committed to is the 50,000 and the 100,000. That's kind of the whole point of them trying to move forward with this.
Yep.
They can't incur any additional costs. They're a nonprofit. In order to get the funding, we have to own it and be accountable.
Insurance and everything that goes with it.
And
Yeah,
that's
it goes with- like I said, we
yeah,
can't
that's
have our
part
cake
of
and
it.
eat it too.
Right.
It's part of accepting that.
We got the dollar part there, that's no problem. The liability part, I do believe that would be a huge stretch to try to force something like that.
If we own it, we own it.
Right.
Own it.
Yeah, and we're insured and
Just
they
like
are,
every-
actually, they're still insured too, but the question is who does the
We
damage?
it wouldn't go against their insurance.
Well, if their trolley derails and takes out the bridge abutment, okay, but at 10 miles an hour, well, of course it's pretty heavy, but
That would be the, yeah,
But then that's their insurance.
because it's
Right.
there.
True.
that's,
true, because it does say the use of the bridge.
Given the fact of a history of no injuries, no death, adding stipulations of number 4 and number 9, I think we're good.
And then does that mean we're changing number 11 to 150,000? Or are
Yes,
we saying they're paying
well,
4 or 9,
9 is changed to 100,000.
right? But then does that mean 11 has to change to 150?
Yes.
That comes down to whether it's either or both.
well, that's what we were just
Right.
discussing. We thought 100, either way, they're doing one or the other, so their max is still 100,000, right?
That's what
That's
I'm
what we had just-
thinking,
we
but
just
is that
discussed,
correct,
I thought.
what it says.
So we didn't.
I
need
think
to
that's the
change
only
it?
way they'll agree to sign it.
Probably.
And our best chance of getting funding is right now.
And
Yes.
timely, yeah,
Like right.
100,
Mhm.
in 11 as well.
Okay, I think,
it's either or, right?
I think we got the changes. So that's
Yeah.
something that could be.
So I can
something
email Attorney
think,
Fink tomorrow with these changes.
and tell them time is of the essence.
Yep.
All right, any other questions? I think we covered all the bases here. All right,
So I make a motion that we approve the bill of sale, assignment of interest, consent to the transfer, crossing license, and indemnity agreement as amended. And have authorized Attorney Mills to send it to Attorney Fink from the railroad.
all right, do we have a second?
Second.
Barb, second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye, opposed? None, motion carries. Okay,
I ask that you, yeah, you approved it. I was gonna say maybe a second motion authorizing Joe to sign it as soon as it comes back.
if they,
So
accept-
moved.
if they accept the changes.
Second.
All right, Bill,
Who made the motion?
Bill, Barb, second. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye, opposed? None. Motion carries. Okay. My statement on purpose of closed session.
Move to adjourn or no?
We have to adjourn.
On the agenda, it says.
He just has
we're
to
doing
state the
this.
purpose.
The purpose of this closed session is conferring with legal counsel regarding former Chief Jensen's notice of claim. All right.
Motion,
To move to closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.85 sub 1 sub G for the purpose of conferring with legal counsel regarding former Chief Jensen's notice of claim.
Second.
Barb, second. Discussion? All right, roll call vote. Clarkowski, aye.
Wales, aye.
Reyes, aye.
Church, aye.
Booker, aye.
All right, we are now in closed session.